They said China has declared war. The headlines shout, the world trembles, and the atmosphere thickens with the scent of fear. But I tell you now, this war is not what it seems. What you see on the surface is only the ripple. Beneath it is the storm. The true war began long before the first missile, the first policy, the first threat. The true war is deeper, older. It is not fought with tanks or drones, but with thoughts, emotions, and unseen forces. The war that China declares is merely a shadow of the war that has already been declared against your peace, against your purpose, against your soul. This war, like all wars in the world, is only a manifestation of the greater war, the war within. You see, there's a conflict far more dangerous than any geopolitical struggle. It's the war that takes place in the heart of every human being. Nations rise and fall, but it is the soul of man that is under siege every single day. The war between truth and deception, between hope and despair, between the light of purpose and the darkness of fear. And don't be deceived. This war doesn't come with sirens or red alerts. It slips in silently, through the news you scroll past before you sleep, through the voice that whispers you're not enough, through the bitterness you nurse in silence, the anger you justify, the fear you try to ignore. That is where the real war is raging. You can be surrounded by peace on the outside and still be at war on the inside. And you can be in a world full of chaos, yet walk in perfect peace, if you know how to fight the right war. But too many of us are fighting the wrong battles. We fight people, we fight opinions, we fight the surface, but we never address the enemy within the negative feelings that take root and multiply until they choke our joy, steal our vision, and sabotage our future. When a nation like China makes a move, the world's attention is captured. But when the enemy moves against your peace, your destiny, your joy, do you notice? Do you sound the alarm? Or do you let the invasion happen, one thought at a time, one wound at a time, one compromise at a time? You weren't meant to be a casualty of that inner war. You weren't meant to be a victim of your own feelings. Fear is not your master. Bitterness is not your identity. Depression is not your final chapter. Anxiety is not your compass. These are the tools of a spiritual enemy whose greatest triumph is not in battles won in the skies, but in hearts that give up before the victory even begins. There's a reason the storms outside often stir the storms within. It's because the external world reflects the spiritual realm. That's why the moment conflict rises in the world, many feel shaken in their hearts. But here is the truth. Your peace is not rooted in the headlines. Your peace does not depend on stability in the East or calm in the West. Your peace is not governed by politics, economics, or even human logic. Your peace is a weapon, forged not in ease, but in the fire of faith. And just as China may declare war, so must you. You must declare war on the lies that have settled into your identity. You must declare war on the pain you've made peace with. You must declare war on the hopelessness that has crept into your soul and convinced you that nothing will change. Because the longer you let those things live in you, the more territory they take and the more you become a prisoner in your own soul. Some of you have been under siege for years, smiling on the outside while inside the battle rages. You've lost ground, you've stopped believing, you've built walls instead of altars, but I tell you, this war can be won. Not by the might of men, not by strength, not by striving, but by surrender. Surrender not to the fear, not to the pressure, not to the chaos, but to the truth that you were made for more than survival. You were made to overcome, you were made to rise. The world will always have its wars, but the real war, the one that matters most, is the one happening right now in your soul. The one between who you've become and who you were born to be, between the weight you carry and the freedom you crave. Between fear that keeps you stuck and faith that calls you forward, the question isn't, has China declared war? The real question is, will you? Will you declare war on everything that's kept you bound? Will you rise and fight for the peace that can't be taken? Will you stand not against people, but against the darkness that wants your soul? Because until you do, until you declare your war, you'll never know your victory. The battle is not where you think it is. It's not just on foreign soil, not just in war rooms, not just in policy or propaganda. The greatest war you will ever face is fought on a battlefield no one else can see. That battlefield is your mind. If the enemy can conquer that ground, he doesn't need missiles. He doesn't need armies. He already has the victory. Because everything in your life, every decision, every emotion, every step forward or backward flows from what takes root in your thoughts. When fear breaks out in the world, panic enters the mind. When rumors spread like wildfire, anxiety takes up residence. The external chaos triggers the internal war. And if you don't learn how to fight it, you become a victim of your own thoughts, even while living in the freest land, even while appearing strong to the world. The war for the mind isn't loud. It doesn't come marching in with drums or horns. It comes quietly, almost politely, offering you thoughts that seem reasonable. What if I'm not enough? What if everything falls apart? What if it's all meaningless? These thoughts don't knock. They sneak in. They wear disguises. They sound like your own voice. They sound like truth, but they are not truth. They are lies wrapped in logic, shadows disguised as insight, and the danger is, once those lies take root, they start to shape your reality. Not the truth, but your perception of it. That's why some of the most broken people in the world are the ones who have allowed the wrong thoughts to reign unchecked in their mind. That's why some of the most gifted, called chosen individuals walk around defeated, not because of what's happening to them, but because of what's happening inside them. So how do you fight a war in the mind? Not with willpower alone, not with positive thinking or slogans on a wall. You fight by replacing the lie with the truth. You expose the darkness with light. You don't overcome a toxic thought by entertaining it. You overcome it by confronting it. You declare war on it. You identify it for what it is, an invader, a thief, a counterfeit sent to derail your destiny. The enemy knows that if he can control your thoughts, he can control your emotions. And if he can control your emotions, he can influence your actions. And once your actions are compromised, your life takes a course you never intended. But it all started with a whisper in the mind. One suggestion, one doubt, one seed. But here's the good news. If the war starts in the mind, then so does the victory. If the enemy wages war in your thoughts, then you have the authority to take every thought captive, to make it obedient, to cast it down. You don't have to accept every thought that enters your mind. You don't have to agree with every emotion that rises up. Just because it came to your mind doesn't mean it came from you. And just because it came from you doesn't mean it belongs in you. You have the power to choose. You can choose what you dwell on. You can choose what you feed, because whatever you feed grows, and whatever you starve dies. If you feed the fear, it multiplies. If you feed the anger, it becomes your identity. But if you feed the truth, even in the middle of chaos, peace will rise like a fortress inside you. And it's not enough to just try to think better thoughts. You have to speak against the lies. Silence is agreement. If the enemy plants a thought of defeat and you stay silent, you've allowed it to grow. But when you speak, when you declare the truth, even when you don't feel it, even when it looks hopeless, you're pushing back the darkness. You're building a wall around your mind, brick by brick, with every word of truth you speak. Some of you have let the enemy pitch a tent in your mind for too long. You've let fear sleep there. You've let bitterness decorate the walls. You've let self-doubt furnish the hallways. But it's time to evict every thought that doesn't belong. It's time to tear down every lie that's been holding you back, every voice that's been limiting your calling, every whisper that's tried to talk you out of your identity. There is a war in your mind, but you are not powerless. You've been equipped. You've been called. You've been armed not with earthly weapons, but with divine power to demolish strongholds. And it begins with one decision, to no longer allow your mind to be enemy territory, because the greatest freedom you will ever know is the moment you win the war within. You don't overcome darkness by complaining about it. You don't defeat fear by wishing it away. You don't silence the chaos by running from it. You overcome by stepping into the battle clothed in something greater than yourself. You overcome by putting on the armor of light. And make no mistake, the light is not weakness. It is not soft or sentimental. It is the most powerful force in the universe. Darkness has no defense against it. The moment light appears, darkness flees. You don't have to fight the shadow. You only have to turn on the light. And that's what too many people forget. They think victory is about how strong they feel, how perfect their circumstances are, or how quiet the enemy becomes. But true victory doesn't come from the absence of battle. It comes from the presence of light in the battle. The armor of light is not something you put on once and forget. It's something you wear daily, deliberately, when the world goes dim and your heart grows weary. Because the truth is, negative feelings don't always scream. Sometimes they whisper. They disguise themselves as common thoughts, discouragement, weariness, isolation. And if you're not clothed in light, those whispers start sounding like truth. Before you know it, your soul begins to bow to lies you were never meant to entertain. But the armor of light exposes the lie. It protects the heart. It shields the mind. It reminds you of who you are when everything around you tells you to forget. When the fear comes, the armor says, "You are not alone." When the anger burns, it whispers, "This is not your battle to fight with bitterness." When the heaviness presses in, it declares, "Lift your eyes." You see, the armor of light is not made of steel or stone. It's made of truth, of righteousness, of peace. It's forged in surrender, not surrender to defeat, but surrender to something higher. You don't wear it in pride, you wear it in humility, because only in humility can you walk in real authority. The world teaches you to armor up with ego, with control, with appearances, but that armor breaks, that armor cracks under pressure. But the armor of light, it gets stronger in battle. The more you use it, the more it shines, and don't wait until the battle is obvious to put it on. Don't wait until the storm is raging to seek shelter. The armor is for the everyday, for the small decisions, the quiet moments. It's when you're tempted to hold that grudge and the armor reminds you to forgive. It's when your thoughts spiral out of control and the armor tells you to be still. It's when the news headlines scream war, fear, crisis, and the armor reminds you, you are not of this kingdom, you are of another. You're not called to reflect the darkness around you. You're called to reflect the light within you, and light doesn't adjust to darkness. Light transforms it. You were never meant to blend in with the brokenness. You were called to confront it, with mercy, with grace, with a boldness that only comes from knowing who you are and whose you are. The armor of light isn't defensive. It's transformational. It changes the atmosphere. It silences fear not by shouting louder, but by standing firm. Some of you have tried to fight your battles with human weapons. Anger, revenge, avoidance, pride. But none of those things ever brought true peace. None of them brought freedom. They may have won you arguments, but they didn't win you healing. They may have numbed the pain, but they didn't break the chain. But when you walk into battle clothed in light, you don't just protect yourself. You shift the ground around you. You confuse the enemy. You walk in clarity when others are walking in confusion. You speak life when others speak death. You stand in hope when others sink in despair, not because you're stronger, but because you're covered. Some of you have been walking around exposed, trying to fight battles bare-chested, trying to handle spiritual warfare with emotional tools. And you wonder why you're weary, why you're anxious, why the shadows keep gaining ground. It's because you're not armored up. You've let your guard down, you've left your post, but it's not too late. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have it all together. You just need to suit up. You just need to stand, because when you put on the armor of light, you're no longer reacting to the war. You're shifting the war. You're taking authority over what once took authority over you. And that's where the true power is, not in pretending the darkness doesn't exist, but in walking into it fully clothed in the light that cannot be extinguished. So, if the darkness is rising, then rise brighter. Everything in this world is shaking. Governments rise and fall. Economies boom and then crumble. Promises are made with boldness and broken in silence. People place their trust in systems, in leaders, in structures, only to be left with disappointment, anxiety, and confusion. But what if I told you there is a kingdom that cannot be shaken, a throne that cannot be overthrown, a rule that does not change with the headlines or tremble at the threats of man? You see, too many of us are living like our peace depends on the world. We tie our sense of hope to the stability of nations, our joy to the consistency of our circumstances. And so, when the storms come, and they will come, we collapse, not because the storm was too strong, but because our foundation was too weak. Because we built our lives on shifting sand instead of on the rock that never moves. But you were never meant to be ruled by this world. You were never meant to be enslaved by its fear or swayed by its noise. You were called to live under a higher government, one that isn't run by elections or controlled by armies or shaped by public opinion. And when you align yourself with that kingdom, you stop reacting to what's happening around you and start living from what's unshakable within you. That's why, even when war breaks out, even when the chaos around you screams louder than ever, you can stand. You can breathe. You can walk in a peace that doesn't make sense to the world, because that peace isn't coming from the world. It's coming from above, from the throne that is higher than every other throne, from the King who reigns not just over nations, but over hearts. Some trust in chariots, some trust in horses. Some put their hope in policy or in headlines or in who holds the office. But the one who walks in true peace, the one who rises above the emotional warfare of this age, is the one who says, I know where my help comes from. I know who holds tomorrow. The nations may rage, but the one who sits in the heavens laughs, not because he's mocking our pain, but because his rule is not threatened by the noise of men. This is the mistake we make. We believe the visible world is the ultimate reality. We believe what we can see is what determines who we are, where we're going, and what we'll become. But the truth is, the invisible shapes the visible, the spiritual drives the physical, and the higher kingdom always governs the lower, if we let it. If you want to overcome negative feelings, if you want to walk in unshakable peace, you must stop living like this world is your final authority. You must stop letting circumstances dictate your confidence. You must shift your citizenship. You must decide, I'm not living for this kingdom. I'm living for another. And hear me, this doesn't mean you ignore the world. It doesn't mean you detach from reality. It means you walk through reality with a greater reality inside of you. You feel the pressure, but you don't break under it. You see the darkness, but you're not afraid of it. You hear the threats, but you're not silenced by them, because your victory doesn't come from your surroundings. It comes from your position in the kingdom. That's what gives you authority. That's what gives you clarity in confusion, courage in crisis, strength when others collapse. Not because you're better, not because you have all the answers, but because you know the one who does. And you're not living from fear, you're living from faith, and here's what faith does. It lifts your eyes. It breaks the chains of emotional bondage. It speaks peace in the storm, not because the storm is small, but because your God is greater. And when you live from that place, when your allegiance is to the unshakable kingdom, everything changes. You stop panicking. You start praying. You stop retreating. You start advancing. You stop surviving. And you start overcoming. That's the invitation right now, in the midst of shaking, to anchor yourself in what cannot be shaken. In a world declaring war, to declare alignment with a kingdom that brings peace, not a peace that the world gives, but a peace that the world can't take away. Because no matter how dark it gets, no matter how loud the threats, no matter how far the world falls, there is a higher kingdom, and the one who stands in that kingdom stands in victory.